Alfredo Corchado sat hunched over his desk, the glow of his computer screen the only light in the otherwise dark room. His eyes scanned the screen, flicking nervously between the last of his emails and the evening's report from the field. He had just finished another article detailing the corruption and violence gripping Mexico, but as a reporter he had seen it all, until tonight. A new email had arrived, its subject line cryptic. "They're coming for you, 24 hours. It was from an anonymous source, but Alfredo had seen this kind of thing before. Threats from cartels, paramilitary groups, and dangerous individuals who didn't want the truth to get out. But this one felt different. His gut told him that whoever had sent this wasn't playing games. He sat back, trying to steady his breath. The Zetas, the brutal, terrifying paramilitary group that had taken control of large parts of Mexico, had been one of the most dangerous cartels he had ever reported on. For years, he had been the one uncovering their atrocities. He had exposed their ties to politicians, their involvement in the drug trade, and their ruthless tactics. But now, it seemed like the truth had caught up with him. Someone, somewhere, had decided it was time to silence Alfredo Corchado. The clock on his wall ticked louder, echoing in the silence. "They're coming for you," the email warned again. He knew the Zetas didn't mess around. They didn't just send threats, they followed through. The days of innocent journalists being ignored were long gone. The night was growing darker, and every passing minute added weight to the fear creeping up his spine. Just as he was about to pick up the phone to call his editor, there was a knock at the door. His heart leaped. It was late, far too late for anyone to be here. Slowly he stood and walked cautiously toward the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. The door to his office suddenly burst open, and two masked men rushed in. Alfredo's instincts kicked in. He turned, grabbing the nearest object he could find, a heavy paperweight. But the men were too fast, too prepared. Before he could react, one of them pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at him. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," one of them sneered. In that moment, Alfredo realized his life was no longer in his control. The Zetas weren't just a story anymore. They were a threat, and they were about to take everything from him. But then, something unexpected happened. The gun trembled in the man's gloved hand, its barrel gleaming under the dim light. Alfredo's heart raced, and every instinct screamed at him to run, to find a way out of this nightmare. But he knew deep down that there was nowhere to hide. The Zetas were everywhere. His mind was still spinning from the shock of the confrontation, but one thing was clear: the warning was real. He was no longer just a reporter. He was a target. The man with the gun stepped forward, his cold eyes locked onto Alfredo's. "You're coming with us," he said, his voice low and menacing. The other man, silent until now, moved to block the door. Adrenaline surged through Alfredo's body. He wasn't about to let them take him without a fight. "I don't think so," Alfredo muttered under his breath. In an instant, he lunged forward, throwing his body weight into the man with the gun. The shock of the sudden movement knocked the gun off target, and Alfredo felt a searing pain as the barrel scraped across his shoulder, but it was enough. He pushed the man back, knocking him into the desk, and in a blur of motion, he grabbed the gun. It was clumsy, the struggle chaotic. The other man rushed to recover, but Alfredo was faster, his pulse pounding in his ears. He aimed the gun at the doorway, his finger hovering over the trigger, but his mind screamed to resist. Killing wasn't the solution. He wasn't a soldier. He was a reporter. He needed to think. His mind raced through his options, each more impossible than the last. There was no way to call for help. No police would come to his aid in a city overrun by corruption and fear. He had only one chance. "Move out of the way," Alfredo growled, his voice steady, even as his hand trembled. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. The man in the doorway held his ground, but Alfredo wasn't bluffing. He was running out of time. With the gun still pointed at the door, Alfredo took a step backward, backing into the room. He needed to escape, and fast. The man closest to him, groaning from the fall, started to rise. Without thinking, Alfredo turned and bolted. He knew they'd be on him in seconds, but he had no choice. The city was vast, but in a place like this, the walls always seemed to close in. No matter where he ran, the Zetas would find him. The second he stepped out of his apartment, he was hit with the cold night air. Mexico City's streets were eerily quiet, a city that never truly slept, but tonight seemed to hold its breath. Alfredo ran down the narrow corridor, barely hearing the pounding footsteps behind him. He had no plan, no escape route, just the desperate, burning need to live. He turned sharply onto the street, trying to blend into the shadows. The streetlights above cast long, distorted shadows on the walls, and Alfredo's heart raced in time with his footfalls. Every corner, every alley he passed seemed to stretch on endlessly, the world around him dissolving into a blur of frantic motion. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text, from the same anonymous source who had warned him. "Head north, get to the safe house. They know you're here." His breath caught in his throat. The Zetas weren't just after him. They were all red. Die in the city, tracking his every move. Alfredo's thoughts were a whirlwind of panic and strategy. He couldn't go home. He couldn't call anyone. The safest thing to do was disappear, just for a little while. He had to get to the safe house. He had no choice. As he turned another corner, he was met with a pair of headlights cutting through the darkness. A car. His pulse quickened as the vehicle slowed, and Alfredo's fingers tightened around the gun still clutched in his hand. The car was almost to him, and he had no time to run. He ducked behind a large trash bin, heart hammering in his chest. His breaths were shallow, the sound of the approaching car grinding against the silence of the night. He didn't know if the car was his salvation or his executioner. As it came closer, the vehicle came to a halt. The door opened, and a voice called out to him in Spanish. "Alfredo, over here!" It was a woman's voice, familiar, too familiar. Alfredo peeked from behind the trash bin, his body tense with suspicion. Standing there, illuminated by the car's headlights, was an old contact, Anna, a former colleague from his time reporting on the Cartel's activities. She had disappeared from the scene months ago, her whereabouts unknown. Now, here she was, calling his name in the dead of night. He hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to stay hidden, but Anna was the only chance he had left. "Get in the car," she urged, her eyes wide with urgency. "I can't keep them off you forever. Get in. Now." There was no time to second-guess her. Alfredo sprinted toward the car, slamming the door behind him. The engine roared to life, and the car sped off, weaving through the narrow streets of the city. Alfredo didn't know if Anna could be trusted, but in that moment he had no other choice. He had to believe that she was his way out of this. But as the car careened down the darkened streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that a nightmare was only just beginning. The city blurred by in a sea of headlights and shadows, the world outside the car window a frantic rush of motion. Alfredo's breath was steady, but his heart was not. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to trust Anna, to believe in the only ally he had left. But doubt gnawed at him. Why had she come for him now? Why was she so willing to help? As the car sped down the narrow streets of Mexico City, Alfredo's mind raced. He'd known Anna for years, had worked with her on some of the darkest stories of his career. She'd always been smart, resourceful, but also secretive. There were moments when he had wondered if she was keeping things from him, things about her connections, her ties to certain groups that were better left unspoken. And now, in this life-or-death situation, the thought wouldn't leave him. Anna glanced at him, her eyes glinting with the same urgency that matched his own. "We're almost there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe for now, but you have to trust me." "Safe?" Alfredo muttered under his breath, barely hearing her. He was too busy trying to piece together the tangled web of lies and half-truths that had been surrounding him. "Anna, why are you doing this? You disappeared? Then you show up out of nowhere? You really expect me to believe you've been sitting this one out all this time?" Anna's gaze flickered to the rearview mirror, then back to him. "I didn't have a choice," she said, her voice tight. "You think the cartels just let you walk away? They were watching me, too. I couldn't get involved in any of this. But you—" She paused, biting her lip. "You're not just a reporter anymore. You've been digging too deep, and now they've noticed." The truth hung in the air between them, a cold, unspoken reality that neither of them wanted to confront. Alfredo had spent years uncovering corruption, exposing the sinister dealings that had spread throughout Mexico. He had pulled at threads, unraveling stories that no one wanted told. Now, it seemed those threads had come for him. They turned down a narrow alley, and the car slowed to a stop. Anna parked beside a small, inconspicuous building, the kind of place that blended into the city's chaotic landscape, hidden in plain sight. "This is it," she said, her voice low. Alfredo looked at the building, the unease in his chest growing. "What is this place?" "A safe house. The only place you'll be safe for now," Anna replied. We need to lay low until we can figure out our next move. But as they stepped out of the car, a feeling of dread settled over Alfredo. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a deep, gnawing suspicion that he couldn't shake. Anna led him inside, the door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit room, a few old chairs, a table with papers scattered across it, and a single light hanging from the ceiling. It looked like a makeshift safe house, a temporary hiding place, not a long-term solution. "Get some rest," Anna said, motioning to a chair in the corner. "I'll keep watch." Alfredo hesitated. He didn't trust her fully, but exhaustion was catching up to him. His muscles ached, his mind was foggy, and he hadn't slept in what felt like days. He sank into the chair, but as he did, his gaze wandered to the pile of papers on the table. There were maps, notes, photographs, everything that looked like part of a larger plan. Curiosity tugged at him. He stood up and walked over to the table, carefully picking up one of the photographs. His eyes widened as he saw the familiar image, a photo of him, taken from a distance, from the very night he had received the email warning him about the Zetas. The camera had been hidden, its angle too perfect to be a coincidence. The realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. His heart pounded in his chest as the pieces fell into place. The only person who could have taken that picture was Anna. He spun around, his voice rising. In panic, "You've been tracking me. All this time, you've been watching me." Anna froze. The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Alfredo's mind raced, trying to make sense of the sudden shift. The betrayal was clear now. Anna wasn't just his ally. She had been playing him from the start. She was no better than the people he had been reporting on. "Alfredo," Anna began, her voice trembling slightly, "it's not what you think." But Alfredo wasn't listening. His breath was shallow, his hands clenched into fists. He had been played. She had been part of this all along, feeding him just enough to keep him moving, to keep him trusting, until the moment she needed to drop the hammer. "You led them to me, didn't you?" Alfredo's voice was low, dangerous. "You brought me here to finish what they started." Anna shook her head, her face pale. "No, you don't understand. Enough!" Alfredo shouted, his voice echoing in the small room. "I trusted you. I put my life in your hands, and you've been using me to feed information to the Zetas." The room seemed to shrink around them, the air heavy with accusation and fear. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, Anna did something unexpected. She dropped her head, her shoulders shaking, as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up to her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, barely audible. "I never wanted this to happen. They forced me. They said they'd kill me if I didn't help them." Alfredo's anger flared, but there was no time for a confrontation. He needed to get out. The Zetas were closer than ever, and the walls were closing in. The betrayal stung, but survival was all that mattered now. "Get in the car," Alfredo snapped. "We're leaving, now." Anna didn't argue. She had no choice. She had brought him here, and now she had to get him out. Together they rushed back to the car, but as the I stepped outside. The sound of approaching footsteps froze them in their tracks. A car slowed to a stop just in front of them, its headlights blinding them for a moment. Alfredo's heart skipped a beat. The Zetas had found him. The doors to the car opened. Men in black tactical gear stepped out, their faces hidden behind masks. Alfredo could see the cold determination in their eyes. There was no escape now.